Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for joining the Eastern US user group. We had a great day today. Many of you were on it. We had about 130 or so participants on the phone getting certified. So if you were one of them and you got certified, congratulations. And thank you for spending the time with us today. In the morning, some of you were on for one, not the other. Many of you were on for both. But in the morning, we did a fundamental search am, and then in the afternoon, we did a search mastery search am with the coinciding test. So I saw a lot of you got passed it and did well on it, and we're happy to have you as part of the 3,000 plus people that have been certified in the different certifications that Sumo has and offers, both on-site and remote. So thank you for spending the time today. I really appreciate that. My name is Anthony Scibona. For those of you that weren't on the earlier call, I'm one of the directors of sales for Sumo Logic, based here in the New York area. We do these locally usually. We've had a couple over the last year or so. This one's done remote, as you can imagine, based on what's going on with shelter in place. But seems to be a lot of exciting things going on with different states moving to yellow and some to green. So it looks like we'll be getting back to some kind of normalcy soon. So looking forward to seeing everybody in person over the next 6 months or so. As you can see, we have a bunch of presenters that will be presenting today and taking you along for the next couple hours. Pawel is the Principal Technical Product Manager. I'm going to be handing it over to Abhi shortly, who's our Senior Product Manager. Eric von der Linden is our Senior Director in Sales Engineering. And then we're going to have some customer speak. And the user groups are really about everyone on this call getting to know each other, building this community, and also reaching out to each other. So if there's people that you want to reach out to, let me know, let the team know that's on the call, and we will certainly make those connections for you, as long as whoever you connect with is good with that. But it's a great opportunity for you guys to share best practices, what you've done, things you've changed, things you might have changed now that you know what you know about Sumo and your environment. So Brad is going to kick it off. Brad is a DevOps lead and software engineer at Genesys. And then James Hull is a lead security systems engineer from People's Bank. And then Madhu and Pavan from the Children's Place. Madhu is Director of Information Technology, and Pavan is the Manager of Performance Engineering. Will take us through how they're using Sumo at the Children's Place. And then, not only are we here to hopefully provide value to your organizations and work with you closely to achieve your goals, but we also give back to the community, and we've invited Ryan to join us. Ryan is part of the strategic partnership for New York Cares, and we like to help out in the communities and do what we can to better the different charitable organizations out there that are helping do good within different parts of the country. So Ryan will speak a little bit about his organization too. So thank you all for joining. This is all about you and your organizations and how you're using Sumo. So you can see the agenda there. I'm going to hand it over to Abhi shortly. He's going to take us through the product roadmap. And then I believe Eric will probably take us through the security product roadmap, and then we'll get into the use cases with the gentleman I mentioned before from People's, Genesys, Children's Place, and then I'll hand it off to New York Cares. As we go through this presentation, please either speak up or write it, send a message in the chat window for any questions you have, and we'll stop as we go through these different presentations and answer any questions you have. Again, this is your hour and a half, so I want to make sure we get the most out of it. So with that, thanks again for spending the time with us today. I'm going to hand it over to Abhi Khanna, who is our Senior Product Manager, to take you through our product roadmap. Thanks, Abhi.
Thanks, Anthony. Before we get going here, have to showcase the kind of standard safe harbor statement. We are going to walk through some of the items that are in development, some things that are on the roadmap, and therefore they are suspect to change. Next slide, please. So in operational intelligence for monitoring modern applications, there's a few key areas we're focusing on. We're focusing on Kubernetes ecosystem monitoring, diving a little bit deeper there, building upon the foundation we set last year, extending app monitoring, and then my colleague Pavel is going to talk a little bit more about transaction monitoring later in this presentation. In Kubernetes ecosystem monitoring, we're focusing on diving deeper into OpenShift and extending the type of clusters we support, providing better visibility into that control plane, looking at leading service meshes and how do we integrate closer with them to give you visibility across those hops. And of course, looking across our customers for global intelligence benchmarks for Kubernetes and highlighting those insights up to everybody. On app monitoring, we're looking at integrating with more metric sources, looking to expand that to Redis's, to Postgres's, to other types of databases and server technologies, looking at improving and enhancing our alerting setup, really enabling you to have as much context in your alerts as possible, and refining that troubleshooting process so you're able to carry that context through and through. On the transaction monitoring side, we're looking at how do we leverage open telemetry to prevent vendor lock-in and give you a better open standard. We're looking at fast and secure causal transactional level troubleshooting to give you that type of insight at every transaction level, and giving you intuitive service maps and flow diagrams to understand the relationships between the different entities and objects inside of your infrastructure. Finally, looking at APM level KPIs for application service level monitoring needs. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Eric to talk through the security intelligence.
All right. Good afternoon. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. Excellent. So for those of you who are not familiar, so Sumo Logic purchased JASK back in November of last year. We're in the process of fully integrating what was the JASK platform into Sumo Logic. And we'll talk a little bit about some of those areas here. But a couple of data points that are noteworthy. We just finished up the unified ingestion aspect. So now all data flows directly into Sumo Logic. So no more data that is going directly into the former JASK system. Everything runs through the Sumo Logic ingest and then runs through a data subroutine for anything that we want to run through the correlation engine. And so as part of it, right, we've gone through and integrated single sign-on. That was actually a release just this week. So now when you sign into your Sumo Logic instance, it's just a click of a button on your window and it will launch the CSE application within your browser. And you have the ability to be able to navigate between the two of them seamlessly. We're working towards a little bit of the security and compliance model. So as we have brought all the data over, right, and are now subject to all of the requirements in terms of data processing, it continues down the path of being able to unify CSE into the core platform and be able to inherit all of the controls, which will lead us down the path to HIPAA as well as PCI compliance, as well as to a path of FedRAMP. We're actually on the path to FedRAMP moderate, with a target of FedRAMP high in 2021. So obviously for those who have security requirements, very important to make sure that everything stays neat and tidy there. And then also from there, right, looking at expanding out to additional regions. So today we do host in Canada, the US, as well as Frankfurt. There's ongoing discussions outside of that, but for most of the bulk of the folks here, right, that doesn't necessarily apply as much. In terms of security investments, a lot of work has been done to detection enhancements. So rules engine, right? So we actually recently released a brand new rules engine that allows us to do more complex functions. So actually, I'm not sure if Jim's going to talk about it later on, but we actually had gone through this conversation back in the January timeframe, right, as we were releasing it. We've also released the rules prototyping. So now the ability to be able to put a rule in place and see what's going to happen. Am I going to get 1 million events? Am I going to get none, right? It helps me be able to build better rules and be able to do a better job of building content within my environment, but also pulling information from my core alerts. So the work that I've previously done within Sumo Logic Core, I can now use those alerts and feed the Cloud SIEM Enterprise. So whether it's outlier detection, anomalies and different things that we've been tracking, it allows us to be able to feed that directly into CSE and use that as a data point that gets correlated across all of the other content that we're looking at. Big push in for not only GCP, but AWS. So recently we just finished a project around GCP. I think we added about 35 or 40 additional rules, mostly around authentication and understanding, just how people authenticate within the G Suite platform. And again, as well as overhauling a lot of the AWS content that we had, again, with a focus on authentication and understanding privileged user access. That continues with Azure as well. There's a lot of OKRs that we're continuing down that path. A lot of that work is going to be completed here within the current quarter. And then, as always, custom parsers and mappings. So today we do the bulk of that work. There's actually a UI that is going to be worked on to allow for power users to be able to build their own parsers and mappings. But today, right, we'll build it for you. Don't worry about it. Just get the data in, right, and we'll do the rest for you. Makes it very easy for you. It takes the burden off. In terms of investigation management and response automation, right, so we have enabled record search. So, no longer do I have to pivot out, no longer do I have to go and write a SQL-based query, right? I can be able to use all the power and speed of the Sumo Logic interface to be able to query my data, be able to model my data, and ultimately be able to write rules against it. Make it very easy to be able to, build things on the fly. But also, more collaboration options, right? So if I've got multiple users within the system, right, we can take notes, we can have different status, as well as even updates to our HTTP post functionality, right? So I have more options to be able to interface this data with additional systems, such as security orchestration systems or other ticketing systems that I may want to be able to do. And I think the last part here, the advanced reporting, a couple of the little pet projects that some of the folks on the SE team have put together. I'll call it more of the management dashboards, right? Hey, tell me how many insights, how many signals, how long does it take to get to them, and having those readily available at your fingertips within the core platform that shows you, hey, here's how we're using the CSE environment. So just making the interface easier to use, right? Allowing for more data sources to come in and ultimately to be able to show you more value within the system. So Anthony, that's it from me. I don't know if there's any Q&A or questions. You can take a look at it. What is
if anybody has any questions, please jump in.
Yeah, so Stephen had a question. What is the path to transition over the Sumo interface with the JAS components we have or are paying for? So let's see, as a prior JAS customer, now Sumo customer, we're still using the JAS interface front end. Okay, so so Stephen, to answer your question, the path has those being completely integrated here in the next few months. So it is basically going to be just a tab within the Sumo infrastructure, in the Sumo UI. So you'll still have the functionality that you know of with JAS, the same UI that you know of that was JAS, but it's just embedded as a tab. So you can also extract that tab out, so you could have it be completely separate. And actually, you see it now. The way with single sign-on, the way it works, it literally is a button down on the bottom left of the Sumo, the core interface, and it just opens up a window that is the UI that is Cloud SIEM Enterprise. So it will continue to operate that way. The nice part is now that all the data goes through it. Anytime I pick a piece of data that I say, hey, I need to search this, or I want to look back at it, that integration is seamless. It used to be, it depended on where the data had gone in. Now it doesn't matter. Everything running through the core pipeline means that if I look back for an IP address, URL, MD5, a hash, any of those things, right? It's going to be able to find it and identify it. And really the cool part for me is some of those things that if I wanted to say, hey, show me over the last 14 days or 30 days or 90 days, if I were to write that into what was the Zeppelin notebook, that would have taken a minute or two to come back. Half the time you click on it, and before you realize it, the search has all that information there for you. So it makes it very easy and timely from an analyst perspective to be able to pivot around and do your work and ask those questions. Right.
Any questions? Any questions around anything you heard from either of the presentations? I know Abhi's still on. We offered our Kubernetes offering has been out there for quite some time, but it's on the newer side for some of you that are new to Sumo, or some of you that have been longtime Sumo customers that are not aware of that offering, that space. That's something from both the monitoring and security perspective that a lot of our customers are taking a look at, just to be able to monitor that ever-moving environment that's a lot harder to track and secure than a lot of the on-premise solutions that are kind of stay in one place. Any questions on either chat or verbal?
I'm not seeing any right now.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Eric. Next slide, please.
Perfect. Thank you, Anthony. We're going to go ahead and take a quick sneak peek at some upcoming product updates. If you could go ahead and go to the next slide. One of the things that we've been hard at work at is a new dashboarding framework. We've taken a hard look at a lot of the requests that have come through and a lot of the asks, as well as where we wanted to take dashboards going forward. And have decided to kind of build out a new dashboarding framework focused on a few elements here. One of the things that we wanted to focus on was the ability to visualize data across data streams, so logs and metrics, as we add in traces here, enabling that visualization to come through as well. Enabling you to construct the right type of visual stories that you want to construct on your dashboards, really giving you that fine-grained control over how things show up, so that you can actually make errors red and successes green, and tell the monitoring story you need to tell in order to solve problems quickly. Third, we really wanted to take a hard look at workflows and how you could workflow through your information, enabling drill downs, enabling context to pass through dashboard to dashboard. And fourth, we wanted to expand the kind of visualization set that we had, adding in gauges, honeycombs, scatter, and bubble charts as well. Of course, more to come on all of these fronts. We're going to continue to kind of chip away. But with that, if you could go to the next slide, I'm actually going to go ahead and steal the screen share, and we'll go ahead and dive into a demo. Let me know if you're able to see my screen.
Good.
Perfect. So what you're seeing here is one of our Kubernetes dashboards. It's built in the new dashboard framework and showcases a lot of the new visualizations we provide. So you got your gauges, you got your single value panels, you've got your honeycombs here. Single value panels are great for at a glance views, helping get kind of overviews across your clusters in this case, or any type of object you're looking at. Honeycombs are great at identifying hotspots and areas of concern. We have this red honeycomb. We could go dive in deeper here. Speaking towards that connectedness concept, we want to enable things to be clickable and enable things to be leveraged as driving points or pivots to further areas within the product, whether that be through your log streams or to other dashboards. We're kind of expanding on this concept as we dive deeper here to other entities and other objects inside of your system as well. If we go ahead and dive into a brand new dashboard here, you'll see that we've brought out dashboards as a first-class citizen, so you can actually edit it, build it all in line. You have the ability to kind of center your world around that dashboarding experience rather than having to hop through different search tabs. If you're using us for metrics as well, different data stream tabs all around. You have the ability to add panels in directly in line. So here we've got time series distribution, single values, honeycombs, maps, and text. You have the ability to kind of click them right here, add them in line, enter into this new panel editing experience. Once again, all trying to center around dashboards, keeping you in the same place, but also exposing to you the type of controls that you might have to go stylize the queries on this dashboard as you need to. So you've got different chart types underlying the different queries. You've got the ability to add in not just metrics, but logs into these panels. You can have them both overlaid as well. You also have kind of the standard visual control elements from your color palettes to your display types. And one of my personal favorites is the ability now to actually override specific queries. So if you've got an output from a logs query that you want to represent in a very specific way, if you want to have a composite combo chart, you want to color it a specific color, you want to change the opacity, you want to plot it on a different axis, you have all that control down to an individual elemented or item level available through these display overrides. And of course, beyond just kind of the standard extension of those options for legend and axes, in the new dashboards, we also give you access to the underlying JSON so that if there are properties that we don't expose in the UI, whether that be in display overrides or kind of our standard settings, that you still want to change, you're able to kind of dive into the nitty-gritty details, add in additional properties, kind of build on top of the visualization libraries we ourselves are building on top. So we try to provide as much flexibility and control back to you, giving you the ability to really create the type of visual story you want to go create. With that, that kind of wraps up the quick demo of new dashboards. Of course, there's a lot more to come there, and we'll continue to kind of bring that up. With that, I'm going to toss the screen share back to the slides. Do a quick check for questions before we go into transaction tracing. Will a recording of this presentation be shared/emailed? Anthony, I'll toss that question back to you.
It will. Yes, we'll share that with you. Share this with you.
Is the new dashboard feature demo GA out? If not, when? The new dashboards are currently in closed beta. We are looking to GA them in a time frame soon. We're looking at kind of the late June, early July timeframe at the moment. Perfect. With that, next slide. I'll go ahead and hand this off to Pavan.
All right, thanks, Abhi. Thanks, Anthony, for leading the call. And hello, everyone. Hello, Eastern US user group. Greetings from Gdańsk, Poland in Europe. It's my pleasure to share a couple of details with you on the project that I have a privilege to lead within Sumo Logic. That is transaction tracing. We're actually building a transaction tracing solution, transaction intelligence for distributed modern cloud native workflows. We are leveraging, integrating, and building that together with OpenTelemetry project, where we contribute as we believe that the future of obtaining the instrumentation data for applications, application level data like traces and APM KPIs, and this is confirmed by Gartner in the most recent APM Magic Quadrant, lies in open source flexible instrumentation that and not in the black box vendor specific agent type of solution. So this is our strategy. This is what we're building, and we're building the best in class tracing analysis backend for OpenTelemetry data. We believe that trace data needs to follow three main paradigms, three main outcome areas. The first is casual transaction level troubleshooting. So basically the list of traces, drill down into spans, understanding where the problem was, which span, which call was the biggest contributor to the problem. Then using the causal relationships between spans in a trace, we can build all types of nice visualizations like flow diagrams, maps, but also aggregating that data into high-level metrics is very, very important. All the nice dashboards that you have seen from Abhi just a minute ago will be able to show the application level metrics, application level KPIs like response time, like errors on the level of your microservices. You'll be able to add to already existing infrastructure API, KPIs to about your application infrastructure. With that, I would like to ask for screen sharing for a second, and would like to show you what we have actually been able to complete so far with that product, and what we are going to do next. So let's imagine that you get an alert. Let's imagine that you have a problem with your microservice. And such a dashboard you can actually build today, but we are also going to provide dashboards like that out of the box with the data obtained from tracing data from OpenTelemetry. So we have a microservice that has basically problems with errors. You notice that in your alert, you see a spike. Of course, you can very quickly compare that with infrastructure KPIs that is running that microservice, so the CPU, number of active pods, memory of these pods. But it's really what's interesting here is the spike in the error. So we can click on that spike, and we can basically land into the trace query panel, the trace query window, which allows us to immediately query for traces that have been executed through these microservices that we're analyzing and have number of errors bigger than 0. As you can see, there are quite a few of them, but and here we have information through which microservices that particular transaction has flown through. We also see number of errors. We see the status. and we can click on one of these traces to see the exact flow of one example transaction. Since we're interested in errors, we can click on errors only. Then we can see that there are really 3 spans here with errors selected, highlighted with red. Let's investigate one of them. So we can see this is the call to the database, to the Redis. We see that indeed there was an error. We can quickly see the metadata that was added to that span. And by the way, using the OpenTelemetry approach, you can add any type of metadata you want to that list that will automatically appear here in the UI. We can quickly check what is the infrastructure performance and behavior of the pod that is running that microservice, that particular instance that generated that call. As we can see, no problems with the infrastructure. So finally, probably the best way to move forward would be to check the logs and see what was exactly the problem for that error that we have seen. So as you can see, everything tightly integrated. We can quickly use the Kubernetes metadata context to jump to logs, filter for errors, because this is obviously what we're interested in, maybe reduce a number of logs, standard Sumo way to analyze the logs. And then very quickly we see that there is actually a timeout, a Redis timeout, very clearly visible here. So that's the reason of our problem. That's the reason of our errors that are visible on the microservice. Basically, one of the backend services is throwing timeouts, and that is causing the alerts and the problems that we have seen on the dashboard. So that's all from me with regards to the demo. We can go back to the presentation. I would like to officially announce that we are running early access program for that. So next slide, please. And another one. So 2 slides forward. One more. No, don't click, just forward the slide. Yeah, thanks. So we are officially announcing transaction tracing early access preview. If you're interested in exploring more, in learning more, maybe learning how you can adopt open tracing, or maybe if you have already adopted, start sending data to your Sumo org. Please email us at tracing-eap@sumologic.com, and we'd be happy to work with you and show you more and onboard you on our early access preview program. Thank you very much. So with regards to questions, if we have a couple of seconds to answer them.
We do.
Right. So yeah. Thanks for the kudos on APM for capabilities. I guess that's not really a question. How transaction trace? What is required to identify transaction in multiple tiers? As I mentioned, OpenTelemetry is an open source project under a Cloud Native Computing Foundation that does this. It is very simple to set up, supports many languages and frameworks. It is available for free as open source. So I suggest to basically Google OpenTelemetry, see their GitHub repositories, and try to instrument your app. Basically the task, the job is very similar to as you would instrument your app with any type of APM vendor agent approach. So auto instrumentation, but you can also have an option to manually instrument your app. One of the pros of this approach is that this is an open standard. So once you instrument your app for good, then you can basically use any type of OpenTelemetry compatible backend to send these traces. You don't have to rip and replace client and instrumentation if you want to try another vendor. So the migration from one vendor to another vendor is much easier with that. All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I know there were some questions here. I like the comment. I didn't realize that Sumo had such a robust APM offering. That we're trying to make it easier for you. There's a lot going on in your environment, ever changing, moving from on-premise to the cloud. Still have a lot on-premise, using multi-cloud providers. How do we manage that? It becomes very challenging for you. So we're we're trying to provide you a platform. And as you see, and those of you that took the test today and are very knowledgeable about what Sumo offers, we're trying to bring all that together. So we give you one platform that provides you visibility and logs and metrics and allows you to consolidate a lot of the different tools that you have in there, just make it easier for you to use. So thank you for that, Abhi, Eric, and Pawel. And if there aren't any questions, I'm going to move into the customer presentations. Okay. So with that, I'd like to introduce James Hall. James, thanks for joining us. James is the principal IT security engineer at People's United Bank, and he's going to talk about his interactions with Sumo. He oversees the bank-wide enterprise log management and SIEM initiatives, and has been with People's for 3 years. He's also leading up a bunch of other key strategy or initiatives at the bank, which includes cloud migration, which I just mentioned. So, James, thank you for that. Appreciate you spending some time. Don't mean to be so formal, call you James. I know you go by Jim, but thank you for spending the time, and appreciate you being a customer.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony, and good afternoon, everybody. So this is really around our journey to from one SIEM over to Sumo. If you want to just click to the next slide, that'd be great. So a little bit about People's Bank first. We were founded in 1842, so we're over 178 years old. We originally started as Bridgeport Savings Bank with a first deposit that was about $30. With a first week, a total deposit of $97 back in the 1800s. It was a full 4 months before any withdrawal was made, and the first one was for a whole dollar, if you can imagine. Whereas compared to today, we currently maintain about $60 billion in assets. We're in the top 50 largest banks in the country. We've got over 6,500 employees spread mostly across the Northeast, but we certainly have a footprint in most of the United States as part of our commercial lending. We currently have 400 physical branches, along with a presence in about 150 Stop and Shops located in Connecticut and New York, and we are open 7 days a week in a majority of our branches. If you want to go to the next slide, please. So about a year ago, a year to 18 months ago, and prior to our a renewal agreement with our then SIEM vendor, we began a technology review. We often do this with most of our strategic products, and the SIEM was no different. So we also evaluated other SIEM vendors as well. And this was really being driven at the time by a couple of factors. One, we had literally outgrown our SIEM from a hardware perspective, and it required a major lift in order for us to get to the new version. And two, we weren't really happy with the overall performance nor the roadmap of where that SIEM was headed. At the time, at the evaluation time, our SIEM had been in production for about 3.5 to 4 years. And during that time, our organization and SIEM requirements had changed substantially, along with the maturity and growth of our internal SOC. So overall, we viewed performance as poor. Complex searches took way too long. The product lacked flexibility, had difficulties ingesting modern data. And as we look towards some of these more modern offerings, being able to consume that data is a critical component, from a banking perspective. And then on top of that, the organization had expanded retention requirements along with additional requests for non-SIEM or security use cases. So we really started our search with two broad initiatives, a SIEM replacement and an enterprise logging solution. If you want to go to the next slide, please. So we had a number of requirements that we were looking at in order to meet our business use cases. We needed to be able to collect data from all of our data sources, including an ever-expanding number of cloud SaaS and IaaS services, which had been a challenge in the prior SIEM. About 1.5 years ago, the bank has really taken on a cloud-first strategy, so being able to consume those logs from cloud was especially critical and crucial for us. We also needed to be able to retain data in a cost-effective manner. We needed to be able to filter and consolidate data in order to reduce noise where appropriate, and needed to be able to detect, identify, and respond to threats rapidly, and ultimately a tool to protect the organization, our systems, and of course our customers' data, and really to provide deep visibility from a security perspective across the enterprise. Next slide. So after a fairly lengthy and detailed proof of concept or proof of value testing process, we really were quite pleased with Sumo, and we did put them through the ringer. We found Sumo to be the best fit strategically based on our internal overhead and resource utilization, and of course their ability to highly filter events and direct logs to different data sources or different partitions, frequent versus continuous, based on retention and our perception of the value of data and analytics. So some of the things that we need to do is just retain logs, and they may not always have security value, but we're still required to retain those. One of the challenges that we had was managing multiple data streams coming from a single data source. So it was great that Sumo has the ability to support, syslog connections over custom ports. That was really important to us, along with being able to maintain the original source address. Like I mentioned a little earlier, having the flexibility with the long-term retention to meet our business needs, along with supporting our EPS needs of about 50,000 events per second, was a critical piece. So we're currently ingesting about 600 gig a day after filtered events. We're probably sending, somewhere between 750 to a terabyte of data to the cloud. So it's a fair amount of data. Another key component to us was something that we struggled with, was being able to be alerted on data sources that were no longer sending data, whether it was intentional or not. That has certainly been a challenge, and as you can imagine from a security perspective, if the data's not there, you can't very well do analytics on it. So being able to know that a device is or is not sending data is critical for our institution. And another component for us was the ability to query raw data logs, really for forensics, reporting, and analytics. And this is an area that I'm really happy with how well Sumo excels at that. So another piece was CSE. So if we could change slides there for a second. So Sumo Core, in our opinion anyways, while it could be used as a kind of a basic SIEM, it's really CSE or what we JASK that really added those SIEM capabilities that we were looking for. Over the last couple of months, we've worked really closely with professional services, building a team out for our specific use cases within our environment. We've been able to replicate and enhance and often enrich the data during this transition to provide a lot more value to our bank. Another thing that worked quite well for us has also been the credit-based model, especially during the ramp up when we didn't have as many data sources sending data. We were able to kind of see as we went the impact of as we added data sources. And then, of course, being in a bank, we do have slower periods of time for ingestion. So seeing that model and helps kind of level out the expense is quite valuable for us. We're also excited on how quickly being able to see value and how both Sumo and Sumo Core and CSE fit into People's United Bank's current and future initiatives. I feel that we've developed a really strong partnership with the team, and we're really quite pleased with the status, and we look forward to a long-term relationship. And some of the things that we just went over around the Kubernetes is in a place that we're also looking for. We have a presence in both AWS and Azure, and have Kubernetes support. And some of the performance APM stuff will be interesting too as we move forward. One of the other nice things is being able to integrate with outside, we're integration with our existing incident tracking system. So the openness of the platform has been extremely valuable and something we're quite pleased with. So with that, I'd certainly welcome any questions or certainly pass it to the next presenter. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. That was very much appreciated, very detailed, and really got to understand, why you chose Sumo and how it helped, more importantly, People's United Bank. A couple things you said was interesting, because we have, some customers that start on the DevOps side and other customers that start on the SIEM or security side, and you were looking for one solution that did both. And I'm glad you're able to find it and look within Sumo. I think, collecting the data from a number of the data sources and, how important cloud data was to you. And I think people struggle with that. Hey, we know the value of moving to the cloud, but we don't want to lose that visibility and security in the cloud without a solution like Sumo. So that was really interesting to hear.
Yeah, from our perspective, I think being able to, as we look, and everybody I think is being faced with the same thing, having more and more cloud, services that are being consumed and needing to secure those as our security boundaries extended beyond, a traditional data center and, castle and moat, being able to extend this has been critical to our long-term, strategic, planning. So yeah, we're pretty happy with that. And yeah, we took a non-traditional course. I think a lot of people look more for the application performance. We had a SIEM first strategy, and they put me in a couple of DevOps meetings where they were talking about logging, and this is a great place to store logs with rapid search capability. So quite pleased. So thanks again for the time.
No, that's great. Now, just if you have a couple more minutes, I had just two questions for you. You mentioned the data tiers and the credit pricing. Why was the data tiers important to you? And how did you find that experience? Looking at the credits, which is different than a lot of people put a value on the data. Why was that important to you?
Yeah, sure. So I'll hit the credit model first. And really, it has to do with the way that, we send a lot more events during business hours than we do off business hours. So we're able to actually, build a number of credits based on, what we saw as volume at the time. So it's worked out quite well. And then also being able to split with the different credits from a continuous versus frequent partition also makes a difference. So not having to have all of our eggs kind of in one expensive tier is certainly something that we looked at and helped us with the decision. Not all of our data is relevant security data, but it needs to be retained and searchable. But it doesn't necessarily need that real-time dashboarding or CSE sort of analytics behind it. So being able to split those off, I think, was very important for us.
Great. Yeah, thanks again, Jim, for the time. We appreciate it. I don't see any other questions. If anybody on the call has questions, shoot us an email or shoot a chat, and we'd get a response back to you.
Thanks again. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you. You as well. Let's go to Brad. So our next presenter, Bradley Segobiano, is a lead DevOps engineer at Genesys. He helps design, build, and support their automation for CI/CD pipeline of hundreds of deployments and microservices. He's been a customer and power user for many years and been a great partner to Sumo, helping us and as well as helping their organization build a better platform and making sure his teams get the most out of Sumo. In his own words, CI/CD is the only way to deliver software fast enough. I fight for the users. So, really, really strong statement there. And I'm sure your users appreciate you looking out for them and getting them something that's usable and continuous intelligence on their data. So, Brad, I will hand it over to you, and thank you very much for spending the time putting together the presentation, as well as spending the time now, sharing with the rest of the user community.
Sure. Yeah. No, I appreciate it. I'm gonna move it along just because I think I have 25 minutes of content and 10 minutes of slide or presentation time. So it's a skimmed down version of the talk I'd done earlier. But yeah, so like Anthony mentioned, DevOps lead software engineer at Genesys. I primarily work on our CI/CD pipeline, all of our third-party vendor interactions. So every tool that we have that interacts with third-party vendors, high-level AWS infrastructure management. That's kind of what my team is responsible for. So yeah, I'm going to talk about Sumo today. Can you go to the next slide? Real quick, I'll just mention very quickly, because like I said, I don't have a lot of time. Genesys is the leader in contact center software or customer engagement software. And today we're going to talk about Genesys Cloud, which is our 100% cloud-based solution. Go to the next slide. So before I go into that, I really want to talk about our scale. So we are 100% deployed onto AWS. We have, I think, 10 accounts, but that fluctuates. And I think we actually have 11 regions, so that's probably wrong. But we have about 370 microservices. I've done several talks over the years, and every single time I do this talk, that number increases by 50. Sometimes it'll go down just a little bit because the service teams decide they are consolidating microservices or expanding to more microservices, but the number's always fluctuating. Currently, we're about 370. We're running, it says 11,000 instances there. I looked this morning, we were up to 16,000. We have a very elastic platform. So we scale horizontally. Our platform is continuously scaling out. Everything we deploy is inside of auto-scaling groups. So every single one of our microservices can scale horizontally in and out, minus a couple of very small services that are stateful. But everything else is completely serverless, and they scale in and out horizontally. So that number can fluctuate from as low as a couple thousand all the way up to tens of thousands of instances. And every single one of those instances are running Sumo Logic on them. Next slide. This is just trying to show the complexity of our platform. So I said 370, there's probably not 370 on there because this was probably taken before there was 370, but all those little lines are interactions between the microservices. You can see there, it's a very, very complex platform that has tons and tons of microservices. And we're doing something in the order of several thousand deploys to production and to non-production a week. So we're continuously pushing out brand new auto-scaling groups. We're spinning up brand new servers continuously all the time, every single day. I think when I looked this last week, it was probably 2,000 non-production deploys in a week. And I think we had 1,000 production deploys. So that's brand new servers, brand new microservices. Another really interesting bit is our average time or life of a server in production is about 3 days. So we're usually replacing them with before or around 3 days on average. So it's a very fluid, changing environment that we work in. So can you go to the next slide? So one thing that's really important to understand is really at Genesys, all the application development teams, all the people who are building those microservices are responsible for all aspects of that microservices life cycle. So they're responsible for building it, they're responsible for running it, they're responsible for defining the infrastructure they want. So they are writing their own CloudFormation. They are responsible for supporting it in the middle of the night. If there's an issue and they get alarms from Sumo or something else, they're the ones debugging it. They're the ones responsible for securing it. They own all aspects of that piece of software that they're writing and they're pushing out in all levels of in all environments that it's going to go into. There's no handoff in our world. Can you go to the next slide? So real quick about the Sumo Logic numbers. I think you mentioned, I can't remember, 5 years or 6 years we've been a Sumo Logic customer. It's been a very long time that we've been a Sumo customer. So a little bit about the numbers we're talking about here. We have about 9 Sumo instances. We have about 600, this is per month. We have about 611 unique user logins per month. So that's individual unique users logging into the Sumo UI to do something. I'm gonna skip around, but our total ingestion is about 275 terabytes the last month when I looked. So that's about 8 terabytes a day or something. So we're sending massive, massive amounts of data to Sumo. UI searches, 66,000, and there's the other stats there. I want to specifically point out the UI searches. So if you facet that UI search on production versus non-production, it's almost, there's almost an equal divide. which means in our environments, our developers, our security people, all the people that I'm going to go over in the personas in a second, are using Sumo in the non-production environment as much as they're using it in the production environment. And the reason we like that and we want that to continue to happen is because we want familiarity with the tool. We don't want to be using in production a different tool and say not, some other tool for non-production. We want people to be very familiar with the tool and how to use it. And when they're in the middle of a production outage, they know exactly how to use Sumo, for example. So can you go to the next slide? So I'm going to quickly go over how all these user personas use Sumo within Genesys. Some of these would be the same people. So as I mentioned before, if you're a developer and you're writing software, you would fall into the dev, the test, the operations use case. Now, some of the other ones kind of have a mixing, so maybe some of it would fall into security. But then, we have a support, we have product use cases. But I'm gonna talk about each one of these really quickly. So if you go to the next one. For development, we're using it for things like training. So that Sumo is one of the places that we send people when they're new to the company. It's a really great place to show people like, hey, here's this new application that you're going to be working on. Here's some dashboards about it. Here's how you debug issues with it. This is how it works. We use it for debugging and triaging. That's a common theme. You'll see that in all of these personas pretty much. Dashboarding, another one you'll see in all the personas. And obviously alerting. So the same alerts that we deploy to production, we deploy those to dev and test as well. That way, again, it goes back to familiarity with getting the alarms, knowing there's going to be an issue before it actually goes out to production. So we have the exact same sets of alarms in non-prod. Next slide. This is just an example of an operational dashboard for one of our CI/CD tools. So this is tracking things around deployments and updating our ticketing system. Next. So the test persona, so pretty much the same thing in the case of debugging and triaging. So we're still going into Sumo, we're still searching for errors or bugs and looking into issues. We still have the same set of dashboards that we would have in production. So we know exactly what to look for in non-prod. And when we have that production issue, we're able to look at the exact same dashboard in production. We're also doing it for things like tracking failures, as well as performance and scale monitoring. So when we do scale testing, that's where we're going. We're seeing how it interacts in Sumo, like seeing what's happening. Are services logging? Are they having errors? All these types of things. Go to the next slide. And this is an example of that performance and scale testing. So you can see here, we're ramping up connections, right, to one of our servers. And this is just showing we're using Sumo to track the number of concurrent connections that we have. Next. Obviously, this is the big use case I think most Sumo customers come in at, which is the operational use case. They want to look at logs. They want to be able to debug issues in production. This is, I think, one of the common ones. But a couple things that we use it for that's not as common is capacity planning. So we're using Sumo to see where our platform's growing and make decisions based on that, as well as blast radius and SLA tracking. So we do weekly outage reviews with all of the microservice teams, and we do postmortems, 5 whys, all that type of stuff. And in those outage reviews, it's very common that we're bringing in Sumo queries and we're showing the errors that they were seeing. That way we're getting awareness or providing awareness to all the other service teams so they don't reproduce the same issue. Next. That's just an example of using an operational dashboard. You can see a dip in connections. Next. We're using it to monitor all of our AWS infrastructure, so CloudTrail logs, ELB logs, VPC flow logs, S3 access logs. This is where we would go to look to see who messed up something inside of our AWS account or if we're being throttled by Amazon. We also use it to correlate information for AWS support. Sometimes support will say, oh, well, we're not exactly sure what's going on. We can look in CloudTrail, or we can get the CloudTrail logs from Sumo, give them to support and show them exactly what happened. So we're using it for all sorts of things like that. Next. And that's what I was mentioning earlier. This is just an example of one of our postmortem 5 whys RCA process where we're referencing, either they looked in Sumo to figure out the issue, or after the fact, they looked in Sumo to see that the issue has been resolved or is working, as expected now. Next. Security use case, which that's pretty self-explanatory, and the last guy talked about it a lot, but yeah, go ahead and go to the next one. I'll just go over a couple quick ones. We're using it for security dashboards for ages of servers. So we have requirements on how quickly or how often we deploy our servers. So we're using it for things like that. Next. And just a couple other examples for kind of what he was talking about with the SIEM stuff, the login access patterns, things like that. Next slide. Another one I wanted to talk about, another persona that we actually use Sumo for, is for support. So can you go to the next one? So we're using it to actually monitor customer impact. So we use parameterized searching, which if you guys don't know what that is in Sumo, I highly recommend you take a look at it. But you can construct a query and make certain fields in the query parameterized. So this gives us the ability to give it to our support or our customer care organization. They can use the parameterized search, but they don't have to actually be engineers and don't have to know all the inner workings of Sumo. They can just plug in the value that they need to know about a specific customer, and they can get data that from a query that an engineer had constructed. So we're actually using it for support. Next. And product. So we're using it for things like usage pattern, platform adoption, dashboarding, and planning. Next. So this is an example where we're tracking utilization of different endpoints to see if we can deprecate an endpoint, for example. So we're seeing how the platform is being used, seeing if we can make decisions about what we're deprecating, what things are working on our API platform. Next. And we're also, another thing I wanted to call out here, click one more time. What I wanted to call out here is what we're actually doing it, using it for also is to identify customers who have a bad experience or having a bad experience. So this is error rates, and that's isolated to a single customer. We want to get ahead of that, and we can then have our care organization reach out to this customer proactively and tell them, hey, we saw that you guys were having issues or something, and it makes that whole experience more unified by being able to go identify that, hey, we're having errors in our platform, and these errors are centered around this one customer. Let's go engage that customer ahead of time. So we're using it for things like that as well. Next. And obviously, this was a common theme on all of them. Debugging, triaging, that is pretty self-explanatory. Next. One thing I did want to call out, though, as a good example is that log volume can actually be an indicator that there's a problem. So in this scenario here, this service was having issues, but there weren't actually any alarms or errors or anything that were signaling to that service team that they were having problems. They had a process that had gone awry. And in this scenario, we actually got alerted because of the volume. We have thresholds that allow, similar to budgets in Sumo Logic that you can set up, but we have alarms that will go off when you've breached a certain budget, and that's what alerted us and helped that team identify they actually had a problem. Next. And that's it. I think I made it through in time. I'm on the Sumo Logic dojo, so if anybody has questions, you can reach out there. But yeah, are there any questions?
I didn't see any questions in the chat or Q&A, but I mean, you went through a lot there. That was really good. You did keep in the time, so I appreciate that. But a lot of good information in there. A lot of our customers, as I mentioned before, they start in one area or another. You guys have been customers for over 5 years. And you talked about, the users in development and test and operation, security and support, and even product. I don't know if everybody realizes all the different areas that your organization can get value from the data that you're, that we're analyzing for you within Sumo. There's typically 80% of the data that you're ingesting could be used by all the different groups within your organization. So, take advantage of that. As you see, Brad and team has done that. And, that example about the bad customer experience and highlighting that, things happen all the time, right? Everything's not as smooth as it could be, but reaching out to them with that care organization, you talk about how can a platform, a technology platform help you with, revenue? Well, that's a great example of, making sure that customer feels comfortable that, hey, I'm going through something, but they know that I'm going through it. And they care about us. So, that customer satisfaction, that customer experience skyrockets with that. So it's great to see that you're using it that way, Brad. Really, some innovative ways to use Sumo.
Yeah, we're definitely heavy users across, like I said, 644 unique logins. We get a lot of use out of Sumo and all that data we're sending. So.
No, that's great. Yeah, we thank you again for being a customer for all those years and many years more. And thanks for pulling together the presentation and sharing with the rest of the users and community of how you're using Sumo. Thanks again.
Yep, you could skip the next 3 slides. I think there were 3 extra slides at the end. I was just calling out the TAM program. It's great.
Sorry about that. I didn't mean to steal your, cut you off.
No, it's fine. These were here just in case there were questions about certain things. So yeah, you can skip past them. Of course, they have animations.
All right. Well, thank you again. So we will continue to move on, and I have a third customer, the Children's Place, have graciously given up their time as our other two presenters. I have Madhu, Peddaboina. Madhu and I have met a couple times. Hopefully we'll get to meet again, Madhu, when we get this shelter in place out of the way, and Pavan Dusi from the Children's Place. Madhu is the director of IT and has been directly involved in the successful migration to the cloud, which I know a lot of you are going through now. And Pavan is the manager of performance engineering and oversees the e-commerce platform, which, as you know, with a lot of these organizations, the e-commerce platform is becoming more and more instrumental in growing the revenue of organizations like the Children's Place as things continue to go online. They've both been instrumental in deploying and getting value out of at Sumo at we call it TCP as well. So guys, thank you for joining. I'll hand it over to Madhu and Pavan.
Hi, this is Madhu Peddaboina. I'm an IT comm director at Children's Place. Can we go to the next slide? I think we jumped a couple of slides, the introductory slides. Maybe we need to go back. So go to the next one. Yeah, so our journey started like in 2016. We were thinking about the like Sumo Logic. First, let me introduce like who we are right now. By looking at our logo, you might have estimated like who we are. We are the main retailers for the children's apparel. We have our presence throughout US and Canada. We sell our product both in stores and online. Our product is mainly designed for child age newborn to 12 years old. And then the motto for our company is to sell a good quality product at a great price. Having said that, you see some company information here when it got founded, when we went to public trading. And there are a lot of information available on our site and then in public sites. But I want to emphasize more on our digital transformation, which kicked off in 2016. That's when we are looking for a need for the log logic tool. And we explored a couple of other tools like EKS, so ELS, Scibona, and all those open source tools. And then our production landscape were increased at least from a decade. Like when I started a decade back, we were in about production servers, like 2 servers. And then exponentially, we grew like 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 16, 16 to 64 by the time we came into digital transformation. And for our operations, production support, developers, everyone, it is getting a nightmare to troubleshoot and do any forensics, right? Like to get into all the 64 servers. At that time, we were thinking about some log logic tool, which can easily scalable, which can give like all the functionality which we are looking, and then also cost effective and user friendly GUI. At the time, like the pre-sales from Sumo, they came and then they presented this Sumo Logic to us, and then we were opted for that Sumo Logic, and then we started our journey in 2018. I guess we logged out, we did a couple of POCs, and we started our journey at 2018. Can you go to the next slide? So the major thing after our digital transformation is like moving into AWS, or both our front end. The new project, like we bought Jimbori, the brand, last year, 2019. And then starting 2020, we went into like live with Jimbori, and then we moved our front end, the headless architecture, the front end, we moved into AWS, both for our TCP, the Children's Place, and then Jimbori. And then at that time, we were exposed with several AWS technologies like Lambdas, Elastic Beanstalk, AppSync, Node.js, like as a part of our responsive web design project. The main importance which came into limelight, like where the Sumo helped us in like to a greater extent, is when we are troubleshooting like some of these issues, and when we are scaling up when we went into cloud, we want like our footprint got increased, the number of servers got increased. We need to inject a lot of data. We need to archive a lot of data, which is cost effective in cloud arena. So that's where we were able to utilize the Sumo Logic tool to a great extent, and then try to get all that information. And then one scenario which I can quote is like when we are trying to troubleshoot our Lambda invocations. That's where there is some limit in the region in AWS. Like, as you all know, like Lambdas is like serverless framework, which is widely accepted everywhere, which is going to make developers' life easier. There is no need to focus on provisioning the servers. It's everything is managed by AWS, but still there are some glitches, right? Like there are some limitations from the AWS world. We were trying to get an issue where the invocations are like breaching the limit, the quota which we allocated for our region. At that time, I think it was 300, but we don't know how to troubleshoot. We got 20 plus Lambdas. Out of the 20 plus Lambdas, one of the Lambda is taking, like it is in exhausting almost all the quota which we have, the limit which we have for the concurrent executions. And then that time, like it was like very simple to configure rather than using the AWS services, which is new for us. We explored it in Sumo. We configured it in 3 or 4 clicks. Like we injected the logs, Lambda logs into Sumo, and then configured not only like the search, like log searches. We utilized the dashboard's capability, like the monitoring capability, and we configured the monitors. We configured an alert. Can you go to the next slide, please? That is going to explain, like this is how we configure the concurrent execution. As a result, we were able to find out which Lambda is taking, which is exhausting our limit. At that time, the main navigation Lambda, which is one of our main Lambda, which is taking like almost 284 executions out of 300. And then rest of 16 is used by the other 19. So we are getting into a throttle condition, Lambda throttle condition. That's how we were able to detect using Sumo. And at that time, we have 3 options, like either we need to go in the limit, increase the limit, which is cost effective, cost like which is going to be involved with some cost, or go back to our developers and try to fix. And then we kept those thresholds, our developers went back, and then they were able to find out a solution for like fix for it. And then we were back in game. Having said that, the rest of the slides, I'll give an opportunity for my friend, Pavan Dusi, to go over on the next slides.
Hey, Pavan, if you're speaking, you're on mute.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you now, Pavan. Go for it. We can hear you.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. So across our organization within various functional units, we're seeing Sumo Logic has offered great benefits. In some of the key decision makers, where we had to make choices between in our AWS environment, whether we're going to use within the Lambda infrastructure, we're going to use Redis cache or DynamoDB or just plain Elastic cache. We were able to run performance tests, but Sumo gave us a good insight into the traffic analysis, and that helped us make the right decisions and as well as mitigate risks, which actually helped us save a lot of costs. From a development standpoint, we have seen that as a practice, we have our developers and managers have actually leveraged Sumo to continuously monitor for all the issues and exceptions that have come in, and improve the platform by creating like maybe 5 to 10% of the Jira tickets that we've addressed in each sprint are actually for platform improvement, and that is basically because we were able to get a lot of intelligence from the data that is being continuously stored, and understand what are the exception events and what has caused events, as well as how the system has reacted. So that has actually helped us overall improve the system by adjusting timeouts and introducing new timeouts and stuff like that. also, it has given us great insight into the issues and root cause analysis. One of the other things that I really would like to drive upon is the fact that with the multi-layered architecture, once you implement a trace context, and you're having a trace context across all the spectrum, UI, and any API gateway, and your backend, you're now able to you're now with a new. We've just seen about the trace context querying in Sumo Logic. We're able to actually drill down and alert when a certain component of the underlying architecture is actually either experiencing timeout, and not just like which front end or which front end call is failing, but all the way up to the back end, we're able to identify which microservice is failing, and quickly come up to a resolution. The other benefit we got from the platform is we're able to compare with historical trends. We're able to nail down, okay, we see this new exception. When was this introduced? Was it introduced, in June, July, August? Like, we know which release and stuff like that. So that data retention actually helped us nail down and identify the exceptions and compare with historical trends. From a NOC and operations perspective, Sumo has been a very key piece for our security management, security teams. Identify the any security logon scrape attacks or any attacks that go on, and as well as we've configured over 100 P1, P2, P3 alerts, alerting our production support and NOC operations. And some of these are actually directly sent to the appropriate vendor. They're being CC'd on the channel on the trigger email, so they are well aware of what we are seeing, and they are immediately escalated. So that has actually helped in issue escalations and faster resolutions. Next slide, please. So kind of talk about the journey with TCP and Sumo. Next slide. So it all started like how Madhu mentioned in 2016 when we were in the cusp of digital transformation. Some of the challenges were we had to identify how many calls were going to be made to a MU or an API gateway layer, how many calls are going to be made to the front end Node.js layer and stuff like that. What was the current average 90th percentiles, and what are the SLAs that we're giving our customers? So we had to ensure that we are going to give the same SLAs to the customers before and after the digital transformation. And again, going back, so errors is one more thing. We didn't want to give a lot more errors than what we are giving, and then we wanted to know what are the other benchmarks, what are the external vendors, some of the reason that we had to, that our SLAs are suffering. Next slide. So with that goal, we had to actually, every developer had to actually grab all these logs, system outs, access logs, and, split by timestamps, merge from different servers into a single file, write heavy parse scripts. Some of them wrote them in shell scripts, some of them wrote in Python. I'll just give you an example that's right thereafter. But it was very tedious work, and we spent sometimes days to just analyze, events like Cyber Monday and Black Friday. Next slide. This is an example. So just a simple access log, and just to give you or understand what are the high hit traffic. Give me the volumes of say it's from 6 to 7 or 7 to 8. We had to write huge parse scripts in shell. I think this is shell scripting, with using sed, awk, and grep, and then remove all the unique patterns and then roll it up and stuff like that. So heavy scripting, and then the execution of these scripts used to take days and days. Next slide. Then somewhere around 2018, we looked into Sumo Logic, and we implemented them after a few POCs. And some of the biggest benefits is that the remote collectors grab log files from various sources every minute, and then log files are automatically merged according to the source categories and conditions. And then we have triggering alerts that automatically alert or knock centers when, like, for example, a JVM is down or JVM is unresponsive and stuff like that. And it's a custom cloud-based query tool, and so the user is definitely not bound by any resources on his local environment, and we get very good insights into the data. Next slide. So the previous shell script, whatever it was doing, probably in a span of like days and weeks, would actually give us an output similar to this, which, all of you would probably experience. We have to collect like 95th percentiles, 90th percentiles and stuff like that, and that's just a query, and probably executes itself in, like, I want to say less than a minute in once we execute this in Sumo. Next slide. Again, so one of the other benefits that we've seen is threshold alerts. So not only after the event, but sometimes with threshold alerts that we have set up, we know if a JVM is going down or if a certain web server is having issue upfront. So we monitor for all sorts of plugin alerts and plugin timeouts and stuff like that. And that gives us forewarning and sufficient time for us to resolve that. So that's been a big help for us. Next slide. Knock operations. So again, with the impact trigger alerts that we have set up, we're able to quickly identify any infrastructure outages, network issues, or database issues and stuff like that. We've set up threshold alerts, and we were able to identify a whole bunch of external vendors that, such as payment gateways or your points systems and stuff like that, if they're failing, and that's been very helpful for us. Next slide. Any questions?
Yeah, I don't think there's any questions. Well, Pavan, I think, what you and Madhu spoke about with, the out of the box, I think you kind of were talking about very similar value from a, quick out of the box content, help you to, help get you 80% of the way there rather than having to build that content, allowing you to be more efficient, that quicker time to value, and no infrastructure to manage. I think Madhu had talked about. And then, you mentioned some interesting things around, being able to grab data very quickly every minute rather than having the heavy scripting and pulling that data in. It allowed you to be more proactive than reactive, and also being able to manage and monitor your third-party SLAs, which I know can be challenging in some of the environments. So I'm glad that you guys saw that value out of Sumo. I don't have any questions. Anybody on the phone have any questions for Pavan or Madhu? Okay. Thank you both, Madhu and Pavan, for being customers since 2018 and then spending the time with us today and sharing your story with everyone on the call. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello.
So, hey, how are you? I was going to hand it over to Ryan. Thank you. Is that you?
Yeah, that's
Ryan,
me.
Thanks for joining. As I mentioned on the opening, we're in business to help customers and hopefully provide value around data and allow organizations to become more efficient, get some intelligence out of their data and help secure their environment. But what's just as important to us is being in it with our customers, which is one of our core values, is giving back to the community and working within the communities across the world. And so we're happy to be working with you, Ryan, and New York Cares, and I'll hand it over to you, but thanks for spending the time with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it's an honor to be here. My name is Ryan Birol. I lead strategic partnerships at New York Cares. New York Cares seeks to meet pressing community needs by mobilizing New Yorkers in service. We've been doing it for 33 years, and we mobilize about 50,000 individuals into exclusively the 5 boroughs of New York to help 500,000 individuals annually. And if you could go to the next slide, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much. So what we're looking to do in mobilizing volunteers into service is really build equity in the communities of New York. We're seeing with COVID-19, communities that are lacking equity are suffering that much more. And now we're seeing with racial inequity, there's almost a compounded effect. And we focus on three primary areas. Education being our largest space. We run the largest free SAT prep program in the city, raising students' SAT scores by 100 points. We focus on third grade reading proficiencies, making the connection between being behind in reading in elementary school to not being able to get in the college of your choice later on. We also focus on immediate needs. We run a large coat drive. I think a couple of years ago, we surpassed 2 million all-time coats collected and donated to New Yorkers that just simply need a warm coat. It's just a great direct action to really change a life. And we focus on revitalizing declining public spaces. We work in parks in the Bronx, planting trees. We work in community centers, and we have a big focus there as well in education, revitalizing many of the city's public schools that really need a lot of help. In terms of where we're at now in COVID-19 relief, we have been activated by the city, New York City Emergency Management Center, to essentially funnel all volunteers that want to get involved to areas that need it. So our hunger programming, which usually sees about 800,000 meals served annually, has expanded drastically. And since mid-March, our volunteers have actually distributed over 2 million meals to individuals experiencing food insecurity. We're also conducting thousands of calls remotely to older adults that are experiencing isolation. And we have a new role of volunteer tech ambassadors that are actually calling NYC public schools, families and students to make sure they're connected to the internet, their iPads are working, really just trying to bridge the gap and that really drastic chasm that was caused by COVID-19 as students had to unfortunately flood out of schools. Could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So as you see there, COVID-19 response, I understand this demographic, the participants may be spread out a little bit and may not be able to volunteer, but if you would like to, you can always create an account. There's remote volunteer opportunities, as I mentioned. And, we're just doing a lot of reactive, responsive work on the front lines and just embed it in the communities as the world continues to unfold a little bit differently every day. I'll also drop a donate link in the chat. We're running a very exciting fundraising campaign that is actually a Christie's hosted auction where photographer Mark Seliger has donated 25 portraits of major celebrities, and the celebrities get to choose which organization they would like to support. Oprah Winfrey, Keith Richards, and a few more have chosen New York Cares, which is very exciting. And there's more information in that link in the chat. And I'll leave it there. I know it's a little bit of a longer day for y'all, so just very happy to be here, and thank you, Sumo, for hosting.
Yeah, absolutely, Ryan. Thank you for doing what you do. It puts certainly puts everything in perspective, and you're helping hundreds of thousands of if not millions of people every time you reach out to them. I think a couple things that I took from it was the amount of people that you've helped this year. 500,000 people that probably can't help themselves at that point. With some of the disadvantages that they've been presented with, and we're certainly glad to be part of part of the team that's helping to make that better and more equal. And then having the handed out 2 million meals. I think there's the silver lining with COVID is people are realizing they need to do more for those that don't have the same fortunes that we have. So thank you for doing what you do. You make a difference in certainly in the New York community, and those people leave, right, too, and you travel around the country and around the world if they spreading your word. So thank you for doing that. We're happy to be a partner there, and we'll make sure that everybody on this call gets this information, because it's, you know, real important that if you do want to volunteer, that you reach out to Ryan and team and be part of that. So thanks, Ryan.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, everyone.
So we're running just about on time. I think we're trying to end at 4:30. So just to wrap up, thank you everyone for joining. I think it was a very productive day. We started out the day with the cert jams, which I know everybody got certified, and so thank you for spending the day with us. And then we heard some great discussions around product roadmap from the team, which hopefully you got a lot out of, and you can reach out to us if you want more information. We have a lot that's coming down the pike, as well as that's in the product. And then Brad from Genesys, thank you again for presenting and sharing your story. Jim, I'll make sure I don't call you James, although that's very formal. Anyway, Jim, thanks for sharing your story and how People's Bank is using Sumo and helping your organization. And then Madhu and Pavan, thanks both of you from the Children's Place for spending time with everybody in the greater community. I'm sure there'll be folks that reach out to all three of you just to get a better understanding of how you're how you're using Sumo and just how your organization's working. So we'll broker those discussions and those meetings as appropriate. Thank you all for coming and spending the day with us. This was great for us. Hopefully you got as much out of it as we did. And thank you to everyone from the Sumo team that put this on. It takes a different type of effort to put something on via virtual and try to keep everybody interactive and engaged. So thank you for that. With that, unless there's any questions, I'll let everybody go. Any questions or anything? Okay, great. Thanks for the time. Everybody stay safe and healthy, and we look forward to seeing you at the next Cert Jam or user group, and hopefully we'll be on site with you folks in the near future. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you.